In this lesson, we're going to talk about more advanced techniques for manipulating objects in the level editor. Alright, so we've talked about how to use the move, rotate, and scale tools on a basic level, as well as using their snap options. Now we want to talk about how to manipulate objects or transform our objects in their local space and their world space. And we'll talk about what that means exactly and how it's going to be helpful. So to get started, let's take our chair here, and let's say that I want to flip it upside down and put it onto this table. But let's say that I want to do it in kind of a 45-degree angle to where it's out over here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this. I'm going to hold down the E key, and I'm going to rotate that. And I'm going to rotate it in the X direction. Okay, and I'm just going to rotate that 180 degrees to where it flips upside down here. And then on my Z-axis, I'm going to rotate that, let's say 30 degrees. Now if I grab my Move tool, okay, or hit W on the keyboard, notice that the Move tool itself, the gizmo, is still facing in the world direction of X, Y, and Z. Now you can definitely see that with this compass right here. You can see the X is facing down that way, Y, and Z. All right, now what I want to do is I want to change my Move gizmo to where it is in the local space, to where it's actually facing the current direction of the object. Now we can do this by clicking on this little toggle right here. Notice that it has a world icon, letting us know that this Move tool is currently in the world space. Left click on that and it's going to change to this little cube, letting us know that that is in the object's space or local space. Okay. Now notice how the Move tool has changed. Now the Z is pointing down, the X direction is facing forward for the chair, and then the Y direction is facing down the left. Let's go ahead and grab our Z direction. Let's just pull that up, and then I'm going to position that using my Y axis, pull that over there, and then push it forward in the Z, or excuse me, in the X, and then we'll position this up just like so. All right. So there is that. So now we've positioned that using those local directions. Let's go ahead and take our snapping. Let's just turn that off and we'll position that to where it's right on that table there. Now, let's say that we want to parent all of this together. Let's say that whenever we move our table, we want that chair to come along with it, and even this statue here. So we can do this with parenting. And what parenting is going to do is it's kind of like grouping objects together, but I don't think grouping is the right word. Parenting is the best for that. So to do this, what we'll do is we'll go to our scene outliner here. Okay, simply left click on the triangle there and you can see that that is the scene outliner. I'm going to right click and hide that tab again. And I'm going to select my chair and also select my statue that is on the table. Now let's hold down Control, left click on that statue, and you'll see that both of those are now selected. I'm also going to grab this little dividing line right here and drag that down so I can see all of my objects that are in the scene. And then I'm going to take those objects just by left clicking and dragging those, and I'm going to drop that right on the table object. Notice how we now have our table, and then underneath we have this little indentation with the statue and the chair. That's letting us know that these are parented together. I could even collapse that by clicking on this little triangle, and it will only show me my table, but the arrow is telling me that there is something parented to this. So now if I select the table on its own, that chair and that statue are going to move along with it. Okay, and that could be very, very helpful at later times whenever you are developing your levels. Now, if at any time we want to position, let's say, the statue a little bit differently, we can select that statue and we can rotate it and move it any way that we want. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate it along the X, okay, and I'm going to knock it down basically. And then I'm going to grab my Move tool and I'm going to position that to where it's sitting on right on top of that table, just like so. And let's rotate it. Let's turn off that angle snap, and we'll rotate that to where it fits right on top of the table, just like so. Alright, so now I've moved that around, but does that change the fact that it's parented? Well, let's select our table and move it, and you'll see that that does not affect it. So you can freely move your children, get those positioned, but still move the parent object, which is the table, and all of those will follow along. Now, if any time that you want to remove those children from the parented object, you can simply do that by left-clicking and dragging the statue and positioning it somewhere else on the scene here. So as you can see, our statue has been dropped in between. Now, this can be a little tricky sometimes, because if you left-click and drag that, and you can see here it's saying attach to statue, attach to floor, you'll see that it's trying to position that. Now, if I left-click and drag that, notice that if I drop it somewhere like an empty space here, it's going to try and drop that somewhere else. So let's go ahead and position it like right in between somewhere. And that, see how that's parented to the player start? And there I put it in between, and it's no longer parented to that object. Okay, so sometimes that can be a little bit difficult. Now, an even easier way of doing that would be simply to expand out the table here, select your chair, and then right-click on it, and simply hit Detach. Now, doing so, it's going to detach that, and it's no longer parented. If we move our table, you'll see that both of those objects are no longer coming along with that. Go ahead and hit Control-Z to undo that movement, so that way it's positioned back there. You could also go to Edit and then undo right there. All right. So now that we've talked about using the coordinate space, parenting actors together, parenting and unparenting, the many ways that we can do that, let's go ahead and talk about working with BSP geometry. Now, we've talked about placing it, but now I want to show you how we can create things like little rooms and different shapes by mixing additive BSP geometry with subtractive BSP geometry. And we'll get started with that next.